Okay, today is 22nd of August, and we've come to the 43rd chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya called the Asankhata Samyutta. Yesterday we read 2 suttas, now we come to the third, 43.3. The Buddha said, "Monks, I will teach you the unconditioned and the path leading to the unconditioned. Listen to that. And what monks is the unconditioned? The destruction of lust, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This is called the unconditioned. And what monks is the path leading to the unconditioned? Concentration with thought directed and sustained. Concentration without thought directed, with thought sustained only. Concentration without thought directed and sustained. This is called the path leading to the unconditioned." That's the end of the sutta. So here, concentration with thought directed and sustained, vitaka and vichara, is the first jhana. And then concentration without thought directed and sustained, that is the second jhana. So this one in between is between the first jhana and the second jhana. It is without thought directed. You only need to sustain it. So, these states of concentration, different teachers classify them differently, put them under different categories. So like in the Hinduism, they talk about 2 types of samadhi. Sabhikalpa samadhi and nirvikalpa samadhi. So I'm not sure what that is. Maybe it's rupa jhana and arupa jhana. So here, so the Buddha says the path leading to the unconditioned are the jhanas. So in the Buddha's discourses, the jhanas are very important. 43.4. This part is the same. Monks, I will teach you the unconditioned and the path leading to the unconditioned. The unconditioned is the destruction of lust, hatred and delusion. And what monks is the path leading to the unconditioned? The emptiness concentration, the signless concentration, and the undirected concentration. This is called the path leading to the unconditioned. These 3 states of concentration in Pali is called sunyata samadhi. It's the emptiness concentration. Then animita samadhi is the signless concentration. And then the apanihita samadhi is the undirected or desireless concentration. Earlier we read that when a monk comes out of the state called the cessation of perception and feeling, is also the cessation of consciousness. 3 contacts touch him. This emptiness contact, signless contact, and the undirected or desireless contact. So these concentrations are very high concentrations, very near to the cessation of perception and feeling. That's why it's called the path leading to the unconditioned. Because if you attain those states, you're very near to the unconditioned. And these 3 types of samadhi are not explained actually in the suttas. It's a very high state. So it's not. There's only a few suttas you meet these 3 concentrations. They seem to be grouped together. Next sutta is 43.5. Monks, I will teach you the unconditioned and the path leading to the unconditioned. The unconditioned is the destruction of lust, hatred and delusion. But monks is the path leading to the unconditioned. The 4 satipatthanas, this is called the path leading to the unconditioned. The 4 satipatthanas, I like to translate it as the 4 intense states of recollection. Sati, later we'll come to that chapter on Satipatthana, and then we explain more. So the 4 intense states of mindfulness is the path leading to the unconditioned. I think for this chapter, that's all I'm going to go through the suttas. Yeah. So we go to the next chapter, 44. Abyakata Sangyutta, discourses on the undeclared. Abyakata is undeclared. It was not declared by the Buddha. 44.1. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. On that occasion, the nun Kema, while wandering on tour among the Kosalans, had taken up residence at Torana Vatu, between Savatthi and Asankata. I'll stop here for a moment. This nun Kema must be the Buddha's nuns. She picked two as the top nuns. One is for wisdom, and this nun Kema, wisdom is supposed to be topmost among the nuns. The other one that the Buddha praised was Upalavana. Upalavana was the nun who was chief in psychic powers among all the nuns. So this Kema, one day she came to Torana Vatu between Savatthi and Asankata. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala, while travelling from Asankata to Savatthi, took up residence for one night in Torana Vatu between Asankata and Savatthi. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala addressed a man thus, "Go, good man, and find out whether there is any ascetic or Brahmin in Torana Vatu whom I could visit today." "Yes, sire," the man replied. But though he traversed the whole of Torana Vatu, he did not see any ascetic or Brahmin there whom King Pasenadi could visit. The man did see, however, the nun Kema resident in Torana Vatu. So he approached King Pasenadi and said to him, "Sire, there is no ascetic or Brahmin in Torana Vatu whom your majesty could visit." This one maybe is not ascetic or Brahmin, it's ascetic or Brahmana. "But sire, there is the nun named Kema, a disciple of the Blessed One, Arahant Sammasambuddha. Now a good report concerning this revered lady has spread about thus. She is wise, competent, intelligent, learned, a splendid speaker, ingenious. Let your majesty visit her." Then King Pasenadi of Kosala approached the nun Kema, paid homage to her, sat down to one side and said to her, "How is it, revered lady? Does the Tathagata exist after death?" And she said, "Great King, Maharaja, the Blessed One has not declared this, that the Tathagata exists after death." "Then, revered lady, does the Tathagata not exist after death?" "Great King, the Blessed One has not declared this either. The Tathagata does not exist after death." "How is it then, revered lady? Does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death?" "Great King, the Blessed One has not declared this. The Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death." "Then, revered lady, does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death?" "Great King, the Blessed One has not declared this either. The Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death." And the king asked, "How is it, revered lady?" When asked, "How is it, revered lady, does the Tathagata exist after death?" And when asked, "Does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death?" etc. In each case you say, "Great King, the Blessed One has not declared this." But now, revered lady, is the cause and reason why this has not been declared by the Blessed One? And she said, "Well then, Great King, I will question you about this same matter. Answer as you see fit. What do you think, Great King? Do you have an accountant or calculator or mathematician who can count the grains of sand in the river Ganges?" Saying thus, "There are so many grains of sand, there are so many hundreds of grains of sand, or there are so many thousands of grains of sand, or there are so many hundreds of thousands of grains of sand." And the king said, "No, revered lady." Then, great king, do you have an accountant or calculator or mathematician who can count the water in the great ocean thus? There are so many gallons of water, or there are so many hundreds of gallons of water, or there are so many thousands of gallons of water, or there are so many hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. No, revered lady. For what reason? Because the great ocean is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom. And she said, "So too, great king, that form by which one describing the Tathagata might describe him has been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that it is no more subject to future arising. The Tathagata, great king, is liberated from reckoning in terms of form or body. He is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom like the great ocean. The Tathagata exists after death does not apply. The Tathagata does not exist after death does not apply. The Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death does not apply. The Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death does not apply." Similarly, that feeling by which one describing the Tathagata might describe him, that perception, that volition, that consciousness by which one describing the Tathagata might describe him, has been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that it is no more subject to future arising. The Tathagata, great king, is liberated from reckoning in terms of body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. He is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom like the great ocean. The Tathagata exists after death does not apply. The Tathagata does not exist after death does not apply. The Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death does not apply. The Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death does not apply. Stop here for a moment. So, usually the Buddha's disciples, they will say that the Buddha cannot be described as the body or the feeling or perception or volition or consciousness. And then they go on to say that there is no Tathagata, that it is like he is here, and they say the Buddha is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom like the great ocean. This is because when the Buddha has passed into Parinibbana, he has gone to the unconditioned. Nibbana is the unconditioned, and the unconditioned, the unborn, is hard to fathom, is deep, immeasurable. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala, having delighted and rejoiced in the non-Bhikkhema statement, rose from his seat, paid homage to her and departed, keeping her on his right. Then on a later occasion, King Pasenadi of Kosala approached the Blessed One. Having approached, he paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side and said to him, "How is it, Venerable Sir, does the Tathagata exist after death?" And the Buddha said, "Great King, I have not declared this. The Tathagata exists after death." And similarly he asked, "Then does the Tathagata not exist after death?" And again the Buddha said he has not declared this. And then he says, "Then does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death?" And the Buddha said, "I have not declared this." And finally he says, "Then does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death?" And the Buddha said, "Great King, I have not declared this either. The Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death." And the king asked, "How is this, Venerable Sir?" When asked, "How is it, Venerable Sir, does the Tathagata exist after death? Does the Tathagata not exist after death? Does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death? Does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death?" In each case you say, "Great King, I have not declared this." But now, Venerable Sir, is the cause and reason why this has not been declared by the Blessed One. And the Buddha said, "Well then, Great King, I will question you about this same matter. Answer as you see fit. What do you think, Great King? Do you have an accountant or calculator or mathematician who can count the grains of sand in the river Ganges thus? There are so many grains of sand, or so many hundreds, or so many thousands, or so many hundreds of thousands of grains of sand. And he said, no, Venerable Sir. And then the Buddha asked again, then great king, do you have an accountant or calculator or mathematician who can count the water in the great ocean thus? There are so many gallons of water in the ocean, or so many hundreds of gallons, or so many thousands of gallons, or so many hundreds of thousands of gallons of water in the ocean. And he said, no, Venerable Sir. For what reason? Because the great ocean is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom. And the Buddha said, so too, a great king, that form by which one describing the Tathagata might describe him has been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, so there is no more subject to future arising. The Tathagata, great king, is liberated from reckoning in terms of body or form. He is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom like the great ocean. The Tathagata exists after death does not apply. The Tathagata does not exist after death does not apply. The Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death does not apply. So the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death does not apply. Similarly, the feeling, perception, volition and consciousness by which one describing the Tathagata might describe has been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, etc. Similarly, the Buddha said that the Tathagata is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom. And then the king said, it is wonderful, Venerable Sir, it is amazing, Venerable Sir, how the meaning and phrasing of both teacher and disciple coincide and agree with each other and do not diverge. That is, in regard to the chief matter. On one occasion, Venerable Sir, I approached the nun Kema and asked her about this matter. The revered lady explained this matter to me in exactly the same terms and phrases that the Blessed One used. It is wonderful, Venerable Sir, it is amazing, Venerable Sir, how the meaning and the phrasing of both teacher and disciple coincide and agree with each other and do not diverge. That is, in regard to the chief matter. Now, Venerable Sir, we must go. We are busy and have much to do. And the Buddha said, then, great king, you may go at your own convenience. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's statement, rose from his seat, paid homage to him, and departed, keeping him on his right. It's the end of the sutta. This is not the only sutta where the Buddha and his disciple say exactly the same thing. There's some other suttas also. Maybe it's because the Buddha can read his mind. So when he came to ask the Buddha this question, the Buddha already read his mind that this he had already asked the nun Kema before. So the Buddha purposely answered him exactly the same way. The next sutta is 44.2. This 44.2 is found at page 936. This sutta is in the Khanda Sangyutta. And when we went through the Khanda Sangyutta, I did not read this sutta, although it's quite good, because it's quite similar to the other suttas. So if I read too many of them, it will be boring for you. But now we can read it because it's quite good. This sutta is 44.2. It's exactly the same as 22.86. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Vesali, in the great wood in the hall with the peaked roof. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Anuruddha was dwelling in a forest hut not far from the Blessed One. Then a number of wanderers of other sects approached the Venerable Anuruddha and exchanged greetings with him. When they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, sat down to one side and said to him, Friend Anuruddha, when a Tathagata is describing a Tathagata, the highest type of person, the supreme person, the attainer of the supreme attainment, he describes him in terms of these four cases. The Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. When this was said, the Venerable Anuruddha said to those wanderers, "Friends, when a Tathagata is describing a Tathagata, the highest type of person, the supreme person, the attainer of the supreme attainment, he describes him apart from these four cases. The Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death." When this was said, those wanderers said to the Venerable Anuruddha, "This monk must be newly ordained, not long gone forth, or if he is an elder, he must be an incompetent fool." Then those wanderers of other sects, having denigrated the Venerable Anuruddha with the terms newly ordained and fool, rose from their seats and departed. Stop here for a moment. So these wanderers, they are not familiar with the Buddha's teachings. So they thought that the Buddha says that when describing the Tathagata, the Buddha, that the Buddha exists after death, or does not exist, or both exist and neither exists, etc. But this Anuruddha says that is not the case. The Buddha never used these four terms to describe the Buddha. So they thought this Anuruddha must be a fool or just gone forth. Then not long after those wanderers had left, it occurred to the Venerable Anuruddha, "If those wanderers of other sects should question me further, how should I answer if I am to state what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent him with what is contrary to fact? And how should I explain in accordance with the Dhamma so that no reasonable consequence of my assertion would give grounds for criticism?" Then the Venerable Anuruddha approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and reported to the Blessed One everything that had happened, asking, "If those wanderers of other sects should question me further, how should I answer so that no reasonable consequence of my assertion would give grounds for criticism?" And the Buddha said, "What do you think, Anuruddha? Is body or form permanent or impermanent?" And he said, "Impermanent, Venerable Sir." "Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness?" And he said, "Suffering, Venerable Sir." "Is what is impermanent suffering subject to change, fit to be regarded as this is mine, this I am, this is myself?" And he said, "No, Venerable Sir." Similarly, is feeling permanent or impermanent? Is perception, volition, consciousness permanent or impermanent? And he said, "Impermanent, Venerable Sir." "Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness?" "Suffering, Venerable Sir." "Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself?" "No, Venerable Sir." Therefore, Anuruddha, any kind of body or form whatsoever, whether past, future or present, any feeling, any perception, any volition, any consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all aggregates should be seen as they really are with correct wisdom thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, Anuruddha, the learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. He asks, "What do you think, Anuruddha? Do you regard body as the Tathagata? Do you regard feeling, perception, volition, consciousness as the Tathagata?" And he said, "No, Venerable Sir." "What do you think, Anuruddha? Do you regard the Tathagata as in the body?" He said, "No, Venerable Sir." "Do you regard the Tathagata as apart from body?" "No, Venerable Sir." Similarly, do you regard the Tathagata as feeling or perception or volition as consciousness? And he said, "No, Venerable Sir." And do you regard the Tathagata as apart from these aggregates? No, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Anuradha? Do you regard body, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness taken together as the Tathagata? And he said, no, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Anuradha? Do you regard the Tathagata as one who is without body, without feeling, without perception, without volition, without consciousness? No, Venerable Sir. But Anuradha, when the Tathagata is not apprehended by you as real and actual here in this very life, is it fitting for you to declare, friends, when the Tathagata is describing a Tathagata, he describes him apart from these four cases. The Tathagata exists after death, does not exist, both exist and does not exist, neither exists nor does not exist. And said, no, Venerable Sir. Good, Anuradha. Formerly, Anuradha, and also now, I make known just suffering and the cessation of suffering. It's the end of the sutta. So here, first the Buddha goes through that standard questioning that the five aggregates are permanent or impermanent, and he says impermanent. And what is impermanent? Is suffering or happiness, and he says suffering. So what is impermanent, suffering, subject to change, should not be regarded as this is mine, this I am, this myself. Therefore, all aggregates whatsoever, past, present, future, should be seen as they really are with wisdom. This is not I, this is not mine, etc. And seeing thus, the noble disciple experiences revulsion or disenchantment with the five aggregates. And experiencing revulsion or disenchantment, he becomes dispassionate, and from dispassion becomes liberated. Then he asks, is the five aggregates the Tathagata, the Buddha? Has to say no. And then, do you regard the Tathagata as inside the five aggregates? And he said no. Do you regard the Tathagata as outside the five aggregates, apart from the five aggregates? Again he says no. And then do you regard the five aggregates together as the Tathagata? But since the five aggregates are impermanent, they cannot be the Tathagata. So he says no. And do you regard the Tathagata as one without the five aggregates? Again no. So the Buddha says, in this very life, when the Tathagata is alive, something that is, even when the Buddha is alive, that which you can describe is the Buddha. There's no one thing that you can describe as the Buddha, because the five aggregates that are supposed to be the Buddha, they are all impermanent. So there's no single thing that you can point to as the Buddha. So that being the case, even in this very life, you cannot find such a thing that you can call the Buddha. It's just a flux of conditions. So how can you talk about him after death? So here, the Buddha goes into describing this, the Buddha or the Tathagata in terms of the five aggregates, and tries to make a person see that the five aggregates is not the Buddha. And yet, you cannot say that the Buddha has no five aggregates. And then, if you analyze one by one, you find there's no one thing that you can call the Buddha, even when he is alive. So this is a different approach from the previous one. The previous sutta we read, the Buddha doesn't want to go into all this detail. He just says that the Tathagata is deep, unfathomable, hard to understand, hard to fathom. But this one is very different. This one goes into the five aggregates in detail. This type of suttas, reading it is one thing, but really seeing it, you need a very clear mind to see and become enlightened. But it is this type of suttas that Buddha's disciples, after they attain the 4 jhanas, they listen to this type of suttas and actually become enlightened. So I would consider this type of suttas are very important. But a lot of Vipassana followers, they say the most important sutta that the Buddha taught is the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. But I never seen in the suttas anybody listen to the Satipatthana Sutta and became enlightened. Not a single person, Buddha's disciples, listened to the Satipatthana or the Mahasatipatthana Sutta and became enlightened. It is these type of suttas, when you analyze the aggregates in detail, that they become enlightened. So these type of suttas are much more important.